Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing soul coming to us from the US, but originally from Romania. We have Aurora Belcea on board today. Aurora is a retired math teacher who has been practicing insight meditation for many years. She is a contactee with connections to ETs and extra dimensional beings who support the idea of a mutually beneficial and peaceful open contact with our star families. More recently, she has been channeling these beings to draw their portraits. She is interested in continuing to develop her intuitive artistic abilities as well as connecting with our star families using various modalities of communication such as telepathy and two-way radios. So Aurora, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure. I feel very honored. I've watched some of your other interviews and I'm in pretty exceptional company. I can't believe it.
That's so kind, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Um, so let's talk a bit about your childhood in Romania, since I've never had the chance to travel a bit. Can you tell us about your upbringing in Romania? If anything otherworldly happened to you at the time?
Yeah, Romania was a communist at the time that I was there. So when I was a teenager, my dad ended up escaping and we moved from France and then to United States. So that was the process. But while I was growing up, I don't actually have any recollection of being visited by any beings, but I did grow up feeling like I didn't fit in. And I'm sure a lot of star seeds can relate to that. I remember when I was very little, maybe 4 or 5 years old, if that, um, feeling like I was being encased in this physical body and I was beginning to only be able to see through my eyes and hear through my ears, where before I felt like I was really just sort of interacting with my environment in a more holistic way. It just seemed as I got older that my ability to interface with my environment was becoming increasingly more and more limited. So I'm not sure, um, why that was happening. But I came to the conclusion on my own that I guess as we get older, we just sort of lose our sensitivity. And, I hit the tree, maybe not necessarily the target, but yeah, I remember noticing what was happening. And my biggest concern was that I was beginning to feel like I was asleep. And like I was, maybe a character in somebody's dream, and I was worried about what would happen to me when this person would wake up if I was just a character in somebody's dream. And, eventually I figure out that I was the character in my own dream. And, but those are the kinds of things that I was contemplating when I was very, very little. And, I just did not fit in, was not able to really make friends. I couldn't really relate, to other children. I never really understood why they had to be so cruel to one another. So and it wasn't just during childhood. I mean, this sort of thing, not really fitting in anywhere kind of followed me my entire life. I finally found my tribe 5 years ago, when things started to become a little bit more clear. But, yeah, growing up in Romania, under a communist regime, there really wasn't a lot of fun to be had, so to speak. So I read a lot. I spent a lot of time by myself, and I was really glad when we finally left, and I ended up ultimately in the United States. But it was a trip. It was
Fascinated.
a trip. I'm really glad to be here.
Reminds me of when some of the children, when were somewhat young, they still remember their past lives. So yeah, I guess that, the connection's still there.
Yeah, I think possibly what was happening is, based on, what I know now, is I guess the first few years of my life, my consciousness wasn't fully attached, I guess, to this physical body. And I have a suspicion that I was kind of coming and going in a sense. Um, I do remember the earliest memory that I have was actually of being in my mother's womb. And I really didn't know what I was experiencing at the time. It was just my own self-guided meditation. And I remembered like hearing this rhythmic beating in my ears, but it sounded like my ears were full of water, like boom, 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 and like that. And sometimes it was light and sometimes it was dark. And so that was kind of an odd experience, and it really wasn't until a few years later when I was swimming in the swimming pool and I got water in my ears and I realized, "Oh, wow, this is that's what happened." I had water in my ears and boom, I remembered I was in my mother's womb. So that's my very, very earliest memory, and there was no anything emotional attached to it. Um but like I said, I don't actually have specific memories that I can be 100% sure that, they're actually what happened. There are a lot of flashes and things that pop up in my mind of things that have happened in past lives, but you know how it's like, you're not I'm not really sure. Am I making it up or did this actually really happen? There's really no way for me to get any confirmation. So I don't ignore those experiences entirely, but I just sort of put them aside as, maybe this was possible. I do have other experiences that happened since then that it's like I was fully conscious and I know for sure those were definitely paranormal experiences that just cannot be explained. By conventional means. So, yeah, this whole world of the paranormal really didn't open up to me until 2020. It really took off then. But I did have an experience 10 years ago after I was in a really bad car accident that left me disabled. That's why I had to retire from teaching. I couldn't work anymore. I'm a lot better now than I was then, but I was in a really bad place. I couldn't work anymore. I was in a lot of pain, and I have been meditating for a long time. 20 years now, 25 years, I think. So I was still a serious meditator back then, 10 years ago, and I remember this one particular day, I'm sitting on the couch and I'm just really bummed and just reaching for the remote, just ready to zone out in front of the tube and, forget my worries. I was in a lot of pain, so, it was nice to have something to distract myself with. But in any case, I'm sitting on the couch and I keep getting this nudge, like this internal nudge, go and meditate, go in your meditation room. I had this little closet under the stairs, how there's a space under the stairs. And so that's where I would go meditate. So I wasn't really up for it because I wasn't in a good mood, but I kept getting this nudging. So I finally got up. I went to my meditation room. I sat down, closed my eyes, and as soon as I did that, there was this overwhelming energy that I sensed in the room. It was so intense. I was afraid to open my eyes because of what I might see. So I'm sitting there with my eyes closed going, "Holy cow." And while I'm sensing this energy, there is this intense, I don't know what else to call it, shower of compassionate love. It literally felt like it just penetrated through my body, and I had never had that experience before. It was intense. It brought me to tears, just a overwhelming sense of compassion and love that this being was putting out. And, after a few moments of that, I got this telepathic message. There were a couple of words that I picked up on. He repeated it, that this is not a punishment. This is not a punishment, referring to what was happening to me. My car accident and all the consequences that were happening because I was sliding into a pretty deep depression. And so, it was interesting that that's what he addressed, knowing that that's kind of where I was going. It's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm being punished, karma, whatever." And he insisted that it was not a punishment. And then he said something that I didn't understand then, and I still don't understand now, but I have a little bit more of a context for it. He said, and he referred to like the big guy or some form of leadership figure, some guy who was in charge of a group. And he said that, the big guy is pleased with your progress. And those were the words, pleased with your progress. And I have no idea what that means. Um, Fast forward to 10 years later, I meet my friend Kevin Briggs. And after we have some conversations about my experiences, we reached the conclusion that the being who came to visit me was actually one of the beings that he's familiar with from the Council of Eight. It turned out to be Ort, who was an Arcturian as a teacher, and the big guy that he was referring to is actually Ra, who is Annunaki, and he is the leader of the Council of Eight. So that was, again, a decade before I even met Kevin. But it was life-changing. That was really life-changing. The next really big thing that happened was in 2020 when, I go to these meditation retreats, the silent meditation retreats every year, so, 2020 was no exception. And, during that 10-day meditation course, I had a couple of really mind-blowing experiences where I mean, those experiences felt more real than this conversation does right now. And I understood and I saw the matrix for what it actually is. This unending cycle of birth and death and rebirth and death that really doesn't accomplish anything from life to life. We forget who we are. We start over again. Nothing really carries over that is of any significance. And it was just overwhelming, overwhelming. There's that scene in the movie The Matrix where Morpheus shows Neo what the Matrix is, and then Neo freaks out and he wants to come back out, and he comes to and takes that thing out from the back of his head, and he's just floored and disoriented. He eventually throws up and passes out. Now, my response wasn't quite so dramatic, but it was that sort of feeling, like unbelievable, just an enormous, radical shift in my paradigm, my understanding of reality. So from that point on, I started actively pursuing, exploring consciousness and, developing my awareness of things that we don't necessarily see with our own eyes. I started to remember how when I was younger, when I was little, how I interfaced. It wasn't that I interacted. I literally interfaced with my environment. And I started to miss that. I was starting to remember that, you know what, I shouldn't feel like I'm encased in this suit. There's something is not right with experience my life in this way. There's another way to do it. So um, when I came back home from that meditation course, it was within a couple of days afterwards when I had my first ET experience that I am consciously aware of. And it was very, very strange. I am lying in bed next to my husband. I had been home from that meditation retreat for a couple of weeks now. And I always meditate before I fall asleep. I observe my breath. I practice my meditation. That's how I fall asleep. Well, I'm sitting there and I'm meditating. And then all of a sudden, even though my eyes are closed, this image pops into my mind's eye of me. I'm seeing this perspective of my body where I'm lying down, the same way that I'm lying down in bed, but I'm not in my bed. I'm someplace else, and there's these little grays. 3 of them I saw. We had these little instruments. One of them was by my left shoulder. Another one was further down, by my hip, and there was another one right by my feet. And so it startled me, and I opened my eyes. And the image didn't go away. It was like it superimposed over the image that I was seeing of my bedroom. So I am simultaneously lying down in my bed while at the same time I'm lying down, I guess, on this examination table. They overlapped. if you put, like, I'm not sure how to describe it. It was as if the image of my bedroom and the image of this other reality overlapped. They were transparent. They were one on top of the other. And I've never been able to really explain to myself what was happening, if it was a flashback or maybe part of me was someplace else. But in any case, it was very frightening. When I opened my eyes and it didn't go away, that really freaked me out. And another thing that scared me was um, I couldn't feel anything from these little grays. They seemed very robotic. I mean, they were not robots. They seemed like they were made of organic material, but there was no emotion. They were very task oriented, and they didn't really seem to care that I was afraid. It's like they had something, a task to accomplish, and it really didn't matter to them how I felt about it. They were going to get done, whatever it was they were going to get done. So while I'm freaking out, all of a sudden I'm noticing there's this other taller, it looked like a taller gray with this huge, wide triangular face and these humongous black eyes right up in my face. I had sleep paralysis. I couldn't really move, but I could turn my eyes and I could see him just towering over me, leaning down and telepathically telling me, "We're not trying to hurt you. Don't be afraid. You relax. We're not trying to comfort me," with a lot of compassion. Um, but his facial expression startled me because I had never seen, these big black bug eyes right in my face. They were black, so I couldn't see his expression. And the um, his facial expression didn't match the compassion that he was putting out. And my brain just didn't know what to do with that. And I was absolutely terrified. I had never experienced terror to that degree ever before or since then. And so I couldn't, like I said, I'm trying to figure out how I am in this situation. And all of a sudden, I realized, you know what? I really don't care what they're doing to me. I didn't feel like they had any sort of malevolent intent. So I said, "You know what? I don't care what you're doing to me. I just don't want to know about it." That was basically the conclusion. And as I said that, the image of these grays is starting fading away. And in my vision, I could see that I was in my bedroom. Well, as this image was fading away, my terror was going with it. And my curiosity set in. And I said, "Well, maybe I can handle it." As soon as I said that, it started coming back into focus, and my terror came right with it, and I said, "You know what? I'm not ready." So and they went away. It vanished, it dissolved, that image dissolved. So I'm in my bed, and I'm noticing my curtains are drawn, and I'm noticing right outside my balcony, there's these flashing lights. I thought, could it be like an emergency vehicle, like an ambulance or a police? But there were flashing green lights. And I know that emergency vehicles don't have green lights flashing. And there was no sound, there was nothing. So I'm turning around. My husband's asleep, sound asleep, to tell him, "Honey, there's some weird lights outside our bedroom." And before I even start speaking, the lights shut off. So I got up, um, to open the curtain and see what was out there, and there was nothing. There were no police cars or an ambulance or anything like that in the street. I mean, it was completely silent, and I would have heard if these vehicles would have driven away, I would have heard the sound. I mean, it was in the middle of the night. So whatever that was, I didn't get to see it, but it just vanished. And at this point, I became obsessed with researching UFO-related phenomena and wanting to meet other people who have had experiences, and that's actually what motivated me to, go to the group where I met Kevin Briggs, because I was really having a hard time integrating that experience with the rest of my life. It was exciting, though. I was really, really excited about it. It was fun. It was just a whole brand new thing that I could learn about. Um, Shortly after that experience, my husband and I, we were on the couch one evening, and we were just kind of flipping through through the movies on Amazon Prime, and this documentary about Bashar, that was made by Daryl Anka. Are you familiar with Bashar? Um, popped up, and so wow, this looks really interesting. Both my husband and I were hit with, we know this guy. How do we know this guy? And so that was odd. And then as I was listening to, Bashar in this documentary, he was talking about the things that I remember thinking about when I was a child. The whole idea about being asleep. That's one of the things that he talks about. This idea that there is no time. There's only the experience of time. I remember thinking about that when I was little. There were so many different things that he validated in that documentary from, what I was thinking about when I was a child. So that was very intriguing. I still haven't figured out where I know Bashar from. um, I have some suspicions, but, at a conscious level, I don't have any recollections of anything. And so that's how my journey started. The next strange experience I had was, again, actually, there were a couple more that I don't want to share with you.
Before we get into that,
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to come back, and give yourself a bit of a breather.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually reaching for my water bottle now.
Um, Coming back to Ort the first time, did he ever project a face, or was it only like a verbal interaction you had with Ort?
He did not project a face in my mind's eye. Um, and like I said, I was afraid to open my eyes because I might have been able to see whoever was there, and that would have totally scared me. I was just not ready for anything like that at the time. So, no, I didn't know what he looked like, but I could feel him as this really loving, compassionate, um, overwhelmingly compassionate being that I knew was not human. It appeared humanoid. I thought at the time, I was like, maybe it was an angelic being. I didn't know anything about ETs. I mean, this was about 6 years before um, I had this experience I just described, with the sleep paralysis and all of that. So I had no concept of UFOs at the time, and I was explaining it to myself that maybe it was some angelic being that came to visit me, although that never really sat right with me. It was only after I spoke with Kevin that I'm like, okay, that's it. That's exactly it. I was able to connect my experience with what he was describing, and it really made sense. It really felt right.
And coming to those three grays in the bedroom, or in the room, could you describe them? Like, were they wearing anything, and how tall were they?
They were, I would say, I don't know, 4 feet, if that, 3 to 4 feet tall. And they were wearing, all four of them were wearing this really dark blue jumpsuit with like a turtleneck, it seemed. And yeah, it was going up, partly up their neck. I couldn't see what they had on their feet because I couldn't get up to look. But the three little ones, they had some instruments in their hands that, to be honest, reminded me of the kind of stuff that you would see in that Jetsons cartoon from way back when, with the guns with the little wheels, and it was that style, okay? At least that's what I saw. And they were touching me. I could feel them touching me. I could feel those instruments. Actually, the one went into my upper arm, and it was weird to see it disappear, just like kind of went in. But it didn't hurt. And so I could feel the pressure of it. Like, I could feel that something was happening, but there was no pain. Um, and so like I said, the weirdest thing about them is, though, even though they seemed to be individuals, um, they seemed to be connected to one another in some way. They didn't say anything to me, but they were acting as if they were coordinating in some way. Um, and again, they were very, very task oriented. That was another thing that really scared me, is that they really couldn't care less how I felt about what they were doing. But they didn't seem malicious in any way. Yeah.
Did you ever find out what they were actually doing to you?
No, I never did. But afterwards, it was not right after that experience, but there were a few times afterwards when I would wake up in the morning and I would have like what appeared to be like a puncture wound in the inside of my elbow. And interestingly enough, that happened 1 year, and then to the exact same date the following year. It was in the same exact spot. I took pictures, and the only reason I knew that it was the same date is because when I saw the second one, I'm like, "Wait a minute, I've seen this before." And I went to my camera, and I saw the date when I had taken the picture, and it was the same exact date as the day I had the second one, so that was interesting. And then every now and again, I will wake up with these little bruises that I can't explain. Um, so I know, again, I am not consciously aware in a way that I can say 100% I know this happened, but I know that I do go places at night. I do remember being escorted by somebody, I didn't see who, literally through my window. And I remember feeling the glass as I was going through the glass. It was weird. And so, when I was floating, and I've had some lucid dreams with, experiencing going through walls or being an orb, a glowing orb. And so, but again, these are all things that I classify as lucid dreams. They definitely felt very different from other dreams. And other times I have felt, as I was falling asleep, it almost seemed like I had cats on my bed. I could feel them walking. It seemed like they were walking on the covers and they were walking on me. And whenever that happened, I would involuntarily just pass out. So, after reading about and listening to other people who have had experiences with these kinds of visitations, there are, my experiences have a lot of things in common, I guess, with some other people who have had, um, I guess, these kinds of visits. But, the only time I ever saw a face was in that one instance when, I just described with the three little grays and then the taller one. I drew a picture of the taller one afterwards, and when I drew the picture, I drew it with his hands folded like this. I don't know why I did that. I had no concept of mantis beings at that point. I mean, we're talking, this was just right at the very beginning. I didn't know they even existed. And later, when I did find out about mantis beings and I looked at the drawing, I realized that was a mantis being. That was not a gray. He was very, very tall. And the triangular face is not the shape of a gray face. The little grays they weren't wider than they were tall. And that's this taller gray, that's what he looked like. It was this huge triangular face with a big bug eyes. Um, it's possible that this mantis being put that image in my head so that I wouldn't completely freak out. At least it was a semblance of something that was, I guess, somewhat familiar because I had seen drawings of grays, other places. But now I know that that was a mantis being. And over time, I have developed a relationship with that mantis being. And yeah, we've gotten pretty close. Yeah.
So let's get into the story. Yeah, well, you what happened after those experiences? Did they come back like fairly soon afterwards?
Yeah. It was a period of time when, like I said, I had cats on my bed, and I would fall asleep while I was dreaming. It was like I was dreaming. I knew that I was asleep, and then when I would pass out asleep in my dream. And I realized that that was somebody was causing that to happen. And there was a period of time when those things were occurring. They stopped now, for a while. I haven't had any cats on my bed. But I still have lucid dreams about going places, other planets, floating around. The the experiences that followed after that weren't so much visitation experiences, they were more downloads now. The one download that I had while I was at the meditation center one time, it was like somebody had dumped the contents of their computer into my brain. It was just this pouring in of symbols that I couldn't recognize. And after that, when I came back home, I remembered that I can move things with my mind. And so I started looking into telekinesis, and one thing led to another. And I made my own little, they call it a psi wheel. It's basically just a pin with some aluminum foil. You fold some aluminum foil and you put it on top and it spins. It's like a little windmill. Um, and I was able to move it while it was under a glass. So it's not like the wind would, yeah. That was pretty interesting. That entire experience, I felt as if, how somebody, when they lose a limb, like their leg, and they have prosthetic leg, and they knew how to walk before that accident, but when they get this prosthetic leg, they have to relearn how to walk with that handicap. That's what it felt like. It's like, I know how to do this. I've always known how to do this, but it's the matter of doing it in this body, in this form. And it's, difficult. It's very difficult. I actually, for some reason, have the sense that it should be so much easier. I know how to do it. I know exactly what I have to do. It's just that it doesn't always work until I really put a lot of effort into it. So it's not like I can move furniture around the room, or like Samantha from Bewitched, where I just wiggle my nose. I wish I could do that. And my house clean. But so it's nothing that spectacular. And I've watched other people on YouTube who appear to have a much more developed skill than I have. But for me, what was interesting is that I remembered. It wasn't something brand new that I felt like I was learning. I remembered that I used to be able to do that. So that started developing. Also, my telepathic abilities started developing. And I started to have interactions with, especially the Mantis being, would show up in my mind's eye quite vividly, and just give me information that I didn't understand at the time, and would come to me like I'm driving down the street and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I get it. And it would be this really profound concept of some sort. So, that it just started to expand my mind and my understanding, I guess. The weirdest thing that has ever happened to me after that, was, again, when I was at the meditation center. I'm not quite sure why these things happen there, probably because I'm calmer and there's no other distractions. But, I was, the room where I was staying, there was like a little area for a kitchen, and there's a separate bathroom in this. One morning, I'm in front of the kitchen sink and I'm washing my hands, getting ready to make some breakfast. And there's this little mirror right above the kitchen sink. And I'm looking in the mirror and I'm thinking, oh, I got to blow dry my hair. My hair is still wet. So I look back down at my hands and I notice that there's like all of this soap on my hands, kind of, too much soap, so to speak. And then I realize that my hands are no longer in the kitchen sink. They're in the bathroom sink. And I look up and I'm no longer in the kitchen. I am in the bathroom now. So it went from I'm looking at my hands as I'm washing in the kitchen, to looking at my reflection in the mirror, to looking back at my hands and realizing they're not in the kitchen sink. They're in the bathroom sink. And I went back into the kitchen and I looked on the floor. I mean, there was so much soap on my hands. It would have dripped if I had spaced out and walked from the kitchen to the bathroom. There should have been some on the floor, but there wasn't anything. And the other really weird thing was that the kitchen sink was dry. So that was really bizarre. I didn't have a clock at the time, but it didn't seem like I had any missing time. It was still that same morning. I don't know how much later in the morning it was. We had a schedule, to meet for meditation at 8 in the morning. So I didn't miss that. I wasn't late for that. I have no idea what happened. No idea. But I literally somehow was teleported from one room onto the other, and it appeared to be this seamless experience. It was not like, oh, I passed out for a while, or I don't remember this chunk of time. No, it was like a continuous experience. And I've never been able to explain that in any sort of, I guess, conventional terms. I suspect I got picked up and returned, and perhaps maybe they wanted me to be aware that something had happened. Maybe I wasn't quite ready to, I guess, accept where I had been. What really surprised me was how calm I was. Um, I mean, I'm not an agitated person to begin with, but I was uncharacteristically calm. And when I found myself in the bathroom, I started laughing. And I'm like, wow, so that just happened. And it was interesting. I was actually surprised by my own reaction. That is by far the weirdest thing that I have ever experienced. The telepathic communications that I have with these beings now, you know, it was pretty surprising at first, but because it's been an ongoing thing, I've sort of, I guess, integrated that in my life, and it's no longer something novel. It's like, this is the way we should all be communicating. It feels more natural to me to communicate that way. And sometimes I get frustrated trying to communicate with words, trying to explain, some concept that I'm trying to explain. And it feels like, they call it a thought ball. The way that these other beings communicate telepathically, it's like I get this thought ball that contains information, emotions, all sorts of different things all at once. And so if I try to speak about it, it almost feels like this ball of yarn. I'm trying to, um, I guess, unwind it into yarn that I can give to somebody else, and they don't get the ball of yarn. They just get this pile of tangled up string now, because the information that I get in this thought ball is not linear. So trying to put it in linear terms, with linear language, a lot gets lost in the translation. A lot of it gets lost in the translation. So that's a little, I guess, frustrating, because I'm frustrated with trying to write things in my journal. Let's put it that way. So I've given up trying to keep track of this stuff, just because it loses the specialness of it, gets lost in translation.
Um, Now you talked about your traumatic car event.
Oh,
Did,
yeah.
did having them coming to your life, was it like a healing thing? Did you feel as somebody was watching over you?
Yeah. I didn't realize it at the time, but in the last couple of years, as I have become more aware of these beings and their presence in my life, I realized that, um, first of all, I used to be in a wheelchair. Let me just put it this way. That car accident put me in a wheelchair. I needed a cane to walk around. I had a walker. I don't need any of that anymore. I went snowboarding a couple of years ago. Okay. And took snowboarding lessons and had a ball. So I've gone from being in a wheelchair to snowboarding. I mean, I'm still in the bunny slope, but at my age, I'm okay with that. It's fine. So yeah, they have. I don't have a specific being in mind, but it seems I get the sense that there's a team, and it's not just me. Each one of us, especially starseeds, I think we each have a team of individuals, of beings who maybe some of them just work with us and only us, but we also share. There are some of these beings who come and go, and we share them with other people. Like I know this is true of the mantis being that I am friends with. He comes around, he stays for periods of time, and then he goes, and then he comes back, and so that's kind of how I see it. And they do. I have been able, on occasion, to feel going through a healing process as I'm meditating. Just like having light and energy and just this, pouring into my body. And I can tell that it's coming from a source outside of myself. It's really becoming that clear.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for that. That's for sure.
I eventually developed rheumatoid arthritis, and a few years after that, I had open heart surgery.
Oh my goodness.
But the years in between, I had a lot of contact, and not sure why, but it really changed how I view things, and the fear of death wasn't really there anymore. Because like you, when Ort, his presence, how he showered you with love a bit.
Yeah.
I felt that. I call it love radiation, and that
I like that.
was from an angelic, let's say, because clearly a Caucasian white female lady, big, all wearing white,
Oh,
a
wow.
bit like Chris Bledsoe's, I guess.
Yeah,
Lady.
exactly what I was thinking of when you.
Uh, the chin was slightly roundish, but yeah, long flowing hair down to her shoulders, 18s, hundreds robes ish type of thing. Um, so yeah, I've got a story with that. But coming back to the Council of Eight, how did they show themselves to you, like the first time?
I found out about the Council of Eight from Kevin because he told the story when I first met him. He did a presentation with a story about the Council of Eight, but I had no idea. It took a couple of years actually before I realized, hang on a second here, because it's not just me in that exoconscious community who has contact with the Council of Eight. There are others, and so we started sharing information and stories, and that's how we realized that we're all connected to the same beings. Um, what happened at first was, again, another one of these strange experiences. Um, I went to a C5 at a friend's house, and he is a professional artist. Now, I've always been a creative person, but I don't have this. I didn't have the skill. And I didn't feel like I had the time to develop the skill. So I was pretty much limited to drawing stick figures. That was about it. But I went to my friend's house, and he gave me a little tour of his house, and I got to see his studio, where he paints. And when I walked in there, it was like, whoa, there's something's happening here. I was really just moved by just being in that room. And that evening, we had our C5. We had some sightings. It was nothing spectacular. Nobody landed on his lawn, but we did have some interesting sightings. And after that event, I started to feel this urge to draw pictures of ETs. And at first I was reluctant because, like I said, stick figures that was not what I was trying to communicate. But when I did start drawing, these pictures that were coming out were, like, amazing, amazing. And at first, I thought, I'm probably just making this stuff up in my head, um, because as I was drawing, these stories about these beings would just start developing in my mind. It was as if these beings were talking to me. But because it was new, again, I was just sort of brushing it off as, "Oh, it's just my imagination." But, after a while, people started asking me to make these drawings, draw something for them. And I continued to write the story that came with the being and the information that I got from that being when I was drawing it, thinking that, it's probably just my own projection. But the people that I made these drawings for, there was information in those stories that I couldn't have known. Um, they really felt that I was really onto something. And there were messages coming from these beings specifically for them, referencing things that I could not have known of, details that I couldn't have known because I didn't even know these people very well. They were not my friends. So then I started contemplating the possibility that, wait a minute, maybe they are talking to me. Maybe I am connecting. Um, I don't know 100% that that's what's really happening. I'm sure there's some of my own projection in those messages, but, um, you know, everybody says that it's pertinent to their life, and they're not general statements. They're pretty specific. As I did look back and I thought, could this apply to anybody? So that started happening. And as I started to, develop my skill, I'm really enjoying drawing these portraits. One morning, I was not in a good mood. I was just kind of grumpy, and I decided, well, I'm just going to start drawing because that always makes me feel better. And as I started drawing this portrait, this face of a gray ET sort of started taking shape, and I had to put sunglasses on his face, and I'm going, "This looks really weird. What's ET with sunglasses? It doesn't fit." So I went to erase the sunglasses, and then this voice popped in my head with, "Don't erase those, it makes me look cool." And so that's when I realized that, I was talking to Zark, who is the tall gray from the Council of Eight. And he has an amazing sense of humor, okay? As I was drawing this portrait of him, I connected with him. I mean, he totally cheered me up. Um, the drawing ultimately turned out with him wearing a hat on backwards because after the sunglasses, this image popped. He put this image in my head with him wearing a baseball hat, backwards with the sunglasses looking really cool and holding a light bulb. And the light bulb is a reminder that one of the factors of enlightenment is for us to lighten up on ourselves. So with this light bulb, um, and I had so much fun doing that. It was totally unexpected. After that, I showed my drawing to Kevin, who knows Zark, and he said that that's exactly what Zark is like. The sense of humor was unusual because, based on my other experience with grays, they don't have any emotions. They don't have a sense of humor. They're very, very flat. But Zark is really funny, and he has a really great sense of humor. And then after that, other beings from the Council of Eight started showing up. I think the one I drew after Zark was Dee, who is an Arcturian. She's Ort's partner. And she came through, it was like a completely different experience, a completely different being, she had a very different attitude from Zark and insisted on having specific details in her portrait, like the Arcturus constellation. And so that was interesting. After that, Ort showed up and I drew his, and so one by one, these beings started connecting with me, and I was drawing their portraits and sharing these with Kevin and the rest of my exoconscious group. And Kevin was really just blown away. I mean, he's using my drawings now in his interviews when he tells his stories. He brings those portraits along. Um, what I told Kevin is that I don't know if the images that I draw, if they are actually the way these beings look, because he has seen them face to face. This is how they feel to me. And it is pretty remarkable that I do get, if not the entire face, at least certain parts of the portrait are indeed very similar to what the being looks like. In other words, Kevin was able to recognize who I drew even before I told him what the name was. It was, pretty clear. So that was very, very encouraging. And that's how that's been progressing, really. Um, as I was drawing these portraits of the Council of Eight, Ort kept coming and encouraging me to share them with other people. He encouraged me to put them on social media. And I had been on Facebook years before and I abandoned it just because of all the negativity. And I really wasn't looking forward to putting up my artwork out there for other people to comment on it. But he assured me it was going to be a good thing. And sure enough, I started posting their portraits and I was blown away by the response that their portraits received from people who connected with these beings. And I realized that these beings actually use those portraits to project their own energy into our reality. And that's what people were connecting with. They had a visual that could go with the energy that being actually put out towards people. And there were messages that Ort gave me to share with everybody about, first contact and the reveal, as Kevin calls it. And that really blossomed into me drawing more portraits for more people until it got so overwhelming, because it takes me couple of weeks at least to do a portrait, and that's all I do. So I've taken a little break from that, and now I am working on 3D models of ETs. I started doing that. It's almost like the drawings were two-dimensional, and as beautiful as they were flat. And it feels like we've reached this stage where we're moving up a dimension. So I'm going from 2D to 3D with my art. And yeah, I do have one that I just finished. If you want to show it, I mean, I can share with you if you would like. But I'm gonna try my hand at sculpting, and see how that turns out. Yeah, it's
Could you?
exciting.
Yeah, it is. Uh, could you get into the specifics about the Council of Eight? What the job functions are? And who are they?
I wasn't able to connect in the same way with all of the beings. In other words, I really connected a lot with Ort and Zark. Dee, I've never connected with her since then. It's like she showed up for a portrait, she was around, gave me the information, and she's been gone. I haven't connected with her at all. Um, Ra, I could totally tell that like Kevin says, his energy is tremendous. And so he had quite the presence. You could definitely tell that he was in charge of it all. Chica, the praying mantis, my friend, actually, that I've developed a relationship with, very wise, has very a teacher. They're all teachers in a sense. They do have other things that they do on the side, like Arla, for example. She's a healer, and I'm sorry, Arna is a healer, and Orla is a bioengineer. And I was not able to, like, if I hadn't known from Kevin that she was a bioengineer, I would have just been able to perceive this sort of scientific clinical vibe that she puts out. She is a scientist in the way that she thinks and how she comes across. But I would not have been able to specifically say, oh, it's bioengineering. Oops, sorry about that. I could tell that Zark was actually more forthcoming with the information. I knew he was a propulsion systems engineer because that phrase popped into my head when I was drawing him, and I didn't know that about him. And I told Kevin, he's like, yeah, he is a propulsion systems engineer and a mathematician. So I think maybe we hit it off because I used to be a math teacher. So we share a love of math. I am sure his understanding of math is somewhat different from mine, but um, And yeah, each one of them comes across very differently, and I am able to pick up on, somewhat of the essence of what their interest is. Because the jobs that they take are truly jobs that these are things that they love to do. It's part of who they are. It's not like we have here where I'm working at McDonald's, so that's gonna show in my aura field. Most people don't necessarily wanna work at McDonald's. Not that there's anything wrong with McDonald's, but I think you get my point.
So let me say, I'll pull up some of the images that you sent me, and let's talk about them.
Sure.
Can you talk about that baobab?
Hmm. Yes. He was actually one of the first few drawings that I drew, and, he is in pencil because I wasn't quite comfortable to start with colors yet. But he is a hybrid. Actually, he is a human gray hybrid, and he chose his own name. They choose their names when I guess they are in a place where they can make that decision. And the reason he chose baobab, this humongous tree, is because even though he may look small, he is a lot bigger than he looks, is what he told me. And he's actually interesting, if I remember correctly, he's interested in plants, biology, and things of that nature, and things that grow. I sort of got this agricultural feel from him as far as growing crops and growing plants that we eat. And I got the sense that he was on a ship with others just like him, where the caretakers were grays. And I suspect he is a product of a hybridization program that, for some people, is controversial. I don't particularly have a problem with it. Um, but yeah, that's how I connected with him, really out of the blue. I just got out my pad and I started drawing just to see what comes out. And then all of a sudden, this being starting to take shape, and I, connected with him that way. He's very, very sweet. I mean, and I tried to convey that in his portrait. He's just really, really, really sweet and kind to a fault. There's not a single mean bone in his body. I don't think he's even capable of mean thoughts. He's very, very, innocent, but not naive. Um, he really has quite a bit of wisdom, even though he looks like a child. He's not very old. He is much more mature than his chronological age, or than a child in the same age a human child would be.
Did he ever share with you the reasons why the Greys were hybridizing their own with human genetics?
He didn't specifically tell me, but I was able to find out from just my other experiences in general. Um, the Greys look at the physical form very differently than we do. We have a tendency to identify with our bodies and are very protective of them, where the Greys perceive them as more of like a meat suit that you occupy for a while. Sort of like we have cars. I get in my car and I drive, but I am not my car. My car serves a function, a purpose. It takes me places. Or like a scuba suit. I need the gear, to go swimming. So that's how the Greys look at the physical body. And what's happening is they are actually, from what I understand, trying to help humanity evolve to the next level of consciousness. Well, this next level of consciousness requires a physical body that has a slightly higher frequency than our current physical body now, in order to accommodate the consciousness of, or the soul, I guess you could say, of a being can experience a higher level of consciousness than what we typically experience in human form. So these hybrids are actually, I guess, grown in order to sort of accommodate this extra, this new step towards a higher level of consciousness. It's not, I mean, I've heard people say that, oh, they're going to invade and they're going to wipe out the human race. It has nothing to do with that at all. That's not their motivation. That is not their agenda. It's really a very positive and helpful thing that they're doing, trying to introduce new DNA so that, we can continue to evolve and accommodate more than what our physical body can accommodate now, because our physical shape is very it's bound to 3D reality. It's very heavy, the vibrations of it, and especially the foods that we eat, especially in the Western world, they certainly don't help to raise our frequency. Um, but in order for us to continue to evolve, we do need higher frequency bodies, and it's going to be a slow transitional process. It's not like all of a sudden these hybrids are going to be here and we're going to start, blending with them. This is going to take a long, long, long time. In the same way that the Anunnaki introduced their DNA at the very beginning, with to the bipeds, the primates, whatever they were that were native to Earth at the time, and that took a long time. The way we are now is not the way we're not the same humans that came out of the Anunnaki test tubes. We've changed quite a bit over time. So that's kind of the process. That's how I understand it, at least. Yeah.
Thanks. You sent me a drawing called of a being called Aang.
Oh yes, Aang. Oh yes. He's a praying mantis. He is a teacher, a medicine teacher. Um, Now, while I was drawing him, he had a bunch of messages for a specific person that I had only met once at the C5, in fact, at that specific, my first C5 at my friend's house. And, the only reason I had his name is Nick, by the way, just so that I don't keep referring to him as that person. I had Nick's phone number in my phone because he shared with me a photo that he had taken of a UFO. And I really wanted to have that on my phone so I could bring it home and share it with my husband. So I did have his phone number. And as I'm drawing this being, I have this urge to send this information to Nick. Now, mind you, we've met once, never spoke on the phone. We obviously met very briefly at that C5. So I started sending him texts and I told him, I don't know what's going on, but I've never done this before. I'm drawing this being, and supposedly he is coming through for you specifically. And as I'm drawing and I'm sharing with him these messages, he's just like blown away by what he's hearing because it totally resonates with him. And it actually was relevant to what was going on in his life at the time. Several months later, he texted me back and said that he had his Akashic record read by somebody, and it completely validated all of the information that I had shared with him while I was drawing this being. So Aang is, like I said, he is a plant medicine teacher, is what he really is. And that's why, he sort of looks kind of sort of psychedelic, with all of the patterns around his face. I'm not sure why he reminded me of an ayahuasca ceremony. I've never done ayahuasca. I mean, I know what it is, and I've watched documentaries, but that's about the extent of my experience. And apparently, my friend Nick is really, I don't know if he's had the experience since we've last talked, but he was actively researching that topic at the time I was drawing this for him. So, it was like this teacher came through before he even had the experience. So I'm not sure how that turned out for him, but I probably should ask him next time I see him. It'd be interesting. It'd be very interesting to see what happened.
You talked briefly about a being called Arla.
Yes, Arla. Yeah, she is a tall white. She's the bioengineer with translucent hair. That was hard to draw. Um, and she's one of the Council of Eight. I have not interacted with her beyond her portrait. And I actually had a really difficult time connecting with her until what I actually had to do is I had to cheat a little bit at first. I printed a portrait of her that was in Kevin Briggs' book. He has other people have drawn the Council of Eight, so I printed her portrait, and I'm trying to like trace over her face to try to get a sense for who she is. And I realized this, her face is coming into view that my top range of my frequency is her bottom range. And the overlap between my frequency and hers was really pretty thin. In other words, she vibrated such a high frequency that it was difficult for me to perceive her because my frequency doesn't go high enough. So I ended up having to connect with her when I was meditating and, my mind was more calm. And that's when I connected with her. And that's when I was actually able to draw her. So she didn't come through while I was drawing per se. I mean, I kind of had a feeling that she was there, but a lot of her information came through while I was meditating. So that's how she came to be. She worked with another member of my exoconscious group on a project, a collaborative project that was the Council of Eight and other dimensional beings in our group. There have been a lot of interviews he gave about the process. And if anybody's interested, just go to, I think it's exoconscioushumans.com. And all of that information is there, including all the portraits of the Council of Eight.
You sent me a drawing about a blue avian, I believe, called Arna.
Orna, yes, she is also from the Council of Eight. She was fun to connect with. She's a healer, and at first, when I first drew her, I drew her beak going all the way up into her forehead, like a duck. The beak goes out all the way up to their eyes. And while I was meditating, she came and very clearly and adamantly said, "My beak does not look like that. It's actually a lot shorter. And it's basically just, the lips, our lips, I guess, formed into a beak per se, using, that sort of cartilage. So it's not her nose and her mouth together. It's just her mouth." So I had to go back and fix my drawing and, draw over the orange beak. You can kind of see that there's a slight difference in the color that's right between her eyes. That's because I fixed it. But it kind of looks cool, the highlight makes it look a little better. But anyway, yeah, she had a really interesting personality and loves symbols. So there's some symbols in my drawing. They're kind of difficult to see. There's actually, I think it's universal symbols for male and female. Kevin Briggs shared those with me, and I included them in my drawing, but they're very tiny, small. However, the pink writing around her portrait, she wanted me to write something in light language. I have no idea what I wrote, but that was written under her guidance. I was happy when I wrote it. It seemed, very uplifting and very positive. And she confirmed something that I had been suspecting for a long time, is that symbols actually activate things in our consciousness. Everything that we look at really does affect us physically. And I can attest to this because during meditation, when I go into deep meditation, I recognize that truly my physical form is composed of my thoughts, my memories, my mind. There's all of these things. It actually, we are literally, because we think, in a sense. So everything that we perceive translates into these vibrations, these frequencies that do affect our bodies, and they can. What's the word I'm looking for? When you start something up, not initiate. It's escaping me at the moment. Activate. There it is. Images can activate, especially symbols can activate things that are dormant in our DNA and in our consciousness. So as I was drawing her, I actually started speaking light language and remembered that that was when I was a little girl, I would do that. I spoke light language. I would stand in front of the mirror and I would speak, I would look at myself as I was speaking it. And I remember how happy I was until my mother walked in on me one time. And I was so embarrassed. I never did it again. But I went back to it while I was drawing her. And, it came in and then it faded away. So I guess I don't need to speak light language anymore. But I did record myself. So I'm glad that I did that. I really like the way her drawing came out with the colors. It really captures her vibrant personality. And I'm very proud of the feathers. The feathers came out really good.
You drew a beautiful picture of a being called Ava.
Oh, yes. She's actually the first portrait I ever drew. The first portrait I ever drew. She is an Arcturian energy healer. She's a teacher. She actually trained me. I told you about that download I had at the meditation center with all the symbols. Well, after that happened, along with the telekinesis came this ability to heal with energy that all of a sudden just I had like this urge to start doing this. And I was practicing on myself at first, and I recognized, holy cow, I have an injured right knee that hurts when I walk too long, and I can actually make the pain stop. And that blew my mind. So my first patient was actually my mom with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and Crohn's disease. And I think she has all of the autoimmune diseases that are known to man, unfortunately. And after I don't even know what I did for about 30 minutes, she claimed to have no pain. That lasted for a couple of days, and then gradually it came back. But what was happening while I was doing this is I felt this Arcturian, this Ava, that it was almost like we were in sync, occupying the same physical space in a sense. Our hearts were in sync, as if they were like one, they sort of overlapped over each other. I guess our energy fields were intertwined, overlapped over each other. And I was moving my hands or my arms. She was doing the movement, and I was allowing myself to move according to how she was moving. It reminded me of when I used to dance with my dad, and I would dance on his toes, on his feet. I put my feet on his feet, and he would be walking, and I would be, dancing along with him based on how the steps that he took, I would take the same steps. That's what it reminded me of. It was that feeling of being loved and supported and just cherished, that I felt like I mattered and this was important, what I was being taught. It was profound and very, very intense to actually feel for the first time that an extraterrestrial, just an Arcturian, saw that much value in me. I mean, I've grown since then, and I've learned to appreciate myself in different ways, and I'm a lot more healthy now as I'm starting to feel more and more like a whole person. But that experience that I had with her teaching me how to practice what I call Arcturian Reiki was really amazing. The emotional connection that I had with her was pretty mind blowing. I mean, I couldn't help but just relax into her energy field so that she could move however things needed to be moved. And she taught me how to use my intention as well as movement to, I don't even know how it works, to be honest with you, but I guess I don't need to know. And I've practiced on my mom a couple of times, and every time it's the same result. Unfortunately, it's temporary. It fades away after a couple of days. And I practiced on my husband. I practiced on my dog. But my dog can't really give me any feedback, but my husband does, and he noticed a difference too. So um, I don't get the sense that I have to open a business practicing Arcturian Reiki, but for some reason, this ability is, I get the sense that it's going to become more important later on. And I'm not sure why, but it was important that I knew how to do that. And again, like I said, we have these teams of beings who sort of come and go. And once I learned, she left. She's like, you're doing fine on your own now. And that was it. So, yeah, she was the very first being that I drew. Yeah.
How about the being called Bob? A gray?
Bob, oh, the gray Bob? Was that the black and white? Okay. All right. That drawing actually turned into something else later on. I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually drawing Zark. This is long before I had met Kevin. And the reason I know it was Zark is because that phrase, the propulsion systems engineer, came into mind when I was drawing that. And I didn't name him Bob. Whoever I was drawing said, my name is not Bob, but I really want to be called Bob. And I had this image of this ET with the pocket protectors and the pencils, your typical, nerdish look, your typical, um, rocket scientists at NASA from the 50s that we've seen in the movies. And so that's how that started out. It wasn't a specific being that I knew. It was actually the first time that I drew the face of an extraterrestrial. So Ava was the first ET that I drew that I actually knew. And that drawing that you're referring to with Bob, that was, I remember I was watching a video at the time, how to draw the face of an ET. And so that's how that developed. But eventually it turned into something else because when I drew Zark, I didn't make the connection with the first drawing. It took a while, so I changed that drawing into something else. It's not that anymore, but I'm glad I took a picture of it because now that way I still have it.
You sent me like 3 drawings of Chica the mantid, I believe.
Yeah.
But that being the mantid that came to you earlier on?
Yeah. Chica's from the Council of Eight, and we have grown to be really, really good friends. So the drawing just sort of evolved. Though I think the one where it's like the full figure, that one, I think that was the first one that I drew. Yeah, that was the first one that I drew of him because he showed up again during a meditation course and surprised me. I was meditating and I felt, I used to get panic attacks when I meditated, not in daily life, but while I meditated. And it was very difficult to work through them. And so I felt this panic attack rising during meditation. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, this being showed up and said, "Gotcha," as if I was falling off a cliff into despair, which is what it was feeling like. The panic was like I was falling into this dark abyss. And just like that, like he flipped a switch, the fear turned into overwhelming compassionate love. And I don't get panic attacks anymore during meditation. I feel this overwhelming compassion love. It's almost like he rewired my brain somehow in that moment. And it was very surprising. Um, and I wanted to portray him somehow in a way that felt kind and gentle because I didn't see his face. I got the sense that he was a mantis being, but I didn't have a clear understanding of his face. What really resonated with me was the purple, like a purple shimmering scarf, like a purple metallic, and obviously the drawing that I did doesn't quite capture that, but it's purple at least. And so, yeah, and I wanted to, convey he felt very elegant, um, and regal, even though I didn't see him. I did get to see his face later on, and that's when the drawing where it's just his face with all of the white and gray doodles around him. That's what I saw actually when I first saw his face in my mind's eye. Um, I was just watering my plants on my balcony, minding my own business, and all of a sudden, in my mind's eye, there's this huge bug head with the mandibles open. I mean, the image is horrifying, but simultaneously, there's this feeling of being loved, intense feeling of this being is loving me. And I know that this was not my imagination, number one, because I was wide awake, and number two, because I would never connect that horrible image of a bug about to eat me with the sense of feeling love. That just it's not something I would naturally do. And so that's how I knew that there was a presence there in my mind. Um, and what followed afterwards was pretty spectacular. For a good 30 minutes, I actually felt my consciousness. I felt how infinite my consciousness is and how everything that I perceive, from palm trees to grass to cars, is actually made of my own consciousness. I got to understand how all of my reality is a reflection of myself. And I'm not even talking about my consciousness, I'm talking a reflection of Aurora. I don't have that understanding in this moment when I'm speaking about it, but it was absolutely mind blowing. In fact, it was so intense. I came in back um, inside from the balcony to tell my husband, I don't know what's happening to me, but it feels like I'm getting enlightened or something. I had no idea what to do with that, but it was very enjoyable, very mind opening, and that's why I really love Chica. Is because I've had those types of experiences with him a few times, several times. Sometimes I'm just in my car waiting to pick up my kid from school. And all of a sudden, the universe opens up and there's Chica, you know. Um, the last time I saw him was actually this past, it was in November. Again, I was at a meditation course and he popped in my mind while I was meditating just to say hello. I hadn't seen him in a while. But when I walked back to my room, I couldn't believe it. Right outside my door on the ground, there was an actual praying mantis. And it was big. It was like this big. I had never seen one in the wild. Um, and this was in Georgia, so they're native to that part of the country. They like that climate. And I took a picture of him. He was looking right at me. It's like he turned his head as he saw me walking. He was huge. It was looking right at me as I took his picture, and I knew that was, Chica in mantis form in 3D. It was so sweet of him. I mean, I just started crying, you know? It was yeah, it was very, very, very sweet. Very sweet. I love Chica. He's pretty awesome.
You talked briefly about Ort and Dee, I believe, being a couple.
Yeah, yeah. I only know this, because Kevin said so, but interestingly enough, I sat down to start drawing Ort after I finished Zark, and Dee actually popped in and said he can wait his turn. I sort of brushed him off. I'm here. I have the time for you now. Let's just do this and get it done. And so that's, how she came across. Very no nonsense, very pragmatic. And he is much more emotional and empathetic. And I'm not saying that she's not. She's not mean by any means, but she's very pragmatic, very to the point, very direct, where Ort feels so much more emotional and overwhelmingly loving and supportive. They make a good pair. I think they balance one another out. I wouldn't know because I am not privy to, their relationship, but they are very, very different personalities, and I can see how, together they make a good team. But I have interacted a lot more with Ort than I have with Dee.
You sent me an image about a joyride with Tia.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Um, Tia is another, being that Kevin is familiar with, and Tia's a pilot, and, prior to meeting Kevin, a couple of years before I met Kevin, I had this incredibly lucid dream where I was learning how to fly a UFO using my consciousness or my mind, and there was a gray next to me, a short gray next to me, who didn't have ears. I don't know why I drew ears on him in my drawing, I guess to maybe look a little cuter. In any case, um, the instrument panel in my dream didn't have all the knobs and all the buttons and everything, but I didn't know how else to convey the message that I was actually flying this ship. All it had was these pads where you could place your hand to, I guess, connect with the ship. Now, the problem I had was that there was space for 4 fingers and not a thumb because they have 4 fingers. So my thumb wasn't in the whatever this thing was in the pads in my dream, but I did have my 4 fingers in there, and I could feel that I could direct the ship using my intention, my clear intention and focus. The problem is, like every other human, I have a monkey mind that likes to jump from topic to topic. And Tia made it very clear that I really have to be in control of my mind and my emotions. Otherwise, he put this image in my mind of flying around like a drunken fly, running in circles and just sort of going everywhere. And I realized and appreciated how the grays, because they don't have this burden of being distracted by emotions, they have razor sharp focus and are completely just absorbed into whatever it is that they do. One of my youngest son has Asperger's. He's on the autism spectrum, and he is very much into whatever he's doing at the moment. And that's what Tia reminded me of. He actually reminded me of somebody with autistic, uh, tendencies. I mean, he's just, because he showed me how to do this beforehand. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't think that I can quiet my mind to that degree." And obviously I didn't, but, I really got to appreciate what a gray he shared, I guess, his mind with me so that I would have an understanding. He taught me mind to mind, telepathically, so to speak. In other words, it was him flying the ship, and he shared with me his thought process and his state of being. Actually, that's a better explanation. So that I could imitate or try to imitate that state of being, because that's what it took to fly the UFO. And so that's why I called it joyride, is because, I got to drive somebody else's vehicle. And the image, with the Earth and all the other UFOs, um, that was not what was out the window. There was really nothing out the window. It was just stars. But I just kind of wanted to show that the feeling of feeling at home. Earth is like it's home. And so that was how I was feeling with Tia when I was learning this. It was fun and exciting, and I felt at home. Yeah. At home in a UFO. How about that? Yeah.
Who's the being called John?
John is a hybrid. Actually, that drawing of Bob that you brought up earlier, that's the drawing that turned into John. John is another hybrid that I connected with during a C5 I was doing on my balcony once. And I got the sense that he knew Bashar. Somehow there was a connection between him and Bashar. Now, I know that I connected with him because as I was doing my C5, and I feel like, I'm wondering, is this my own thinking? Am I making up this being, this John? And I'm looking at the sky, and all of a sudden it's like 3 flash bulbs. Right? The portion of the sky was where I was looking. So that's how I got confirmation that I wasn't making it up. And it was just what I interpreted the space where he was to look like. There are a number of different symbols there. It's like you see where the hands, that's how you steer the spaceship with the four fingers. And then there's like, it looks like they're flags or symbols, with the, I think over on the left, if I remember correctly, there's the black and red and white that represents the Orion star system. And then there's another one that's gray, black, gray, and white, and that's for the Gray Federation. And there's a few other symbols in there that represent the Arcturians and the Pleiadians and Sirius and the Anunnaki. I think that one's way down at the bottom. And those were symbols that I saw when I watched one of Bashar's transmissions. He was talking about all of these different civilizations trying to put our place in the universe, I guess, in context. And Bashar said that these symbols, when we look at them and we engage with them, he called them the phone numbers for that particular civilization. In other words, if you look at the symbol for the Pleiadians, which is the 7 white circles inside a big blue circle, that conveys the frequency of the Pleiadian civilization. And you can connect with those beings through that frequency. In other words, it's how that symbol feels when you look at it. At least that's how I understand it. It's like I try to feel it, and whatever vibration, whatever frequency I create in my own mind from what I'm looking at helps me to connect with that specific civilization. So I put those in there because I wanted to convey the idea of connecting. There's a sense of connection among all of the different civilizations that are represented in that drawing, plus more. Because the C5 when I did the C5 by myself on my balcony, and I truly felt connected to everybody during that time. It was like all of these different star families were all right there, and I was somehow connected to all of them. In other words, my family is the Pleiadians, and I also have a family with the Arcturians. I've noticed that many people will say, "Oh, I'm an Arcturian," or "I'm a Pleiadian," and I don't identify myself that way. I am a mutt. I'm a little bit of everything. At least that's how I feel. That's how I feel.
Are you aware if any of your siblings or like relatives have had these types of experiences before?
I shared my experiences with my dad, and he told me it reminded him of an experience that he had when he was young. He was in a classroom getting ready to take a final exam for math, and all of a sudden, he wasn't in the classroom anymore. He was standing outside in front of the school. This is after I told my dad about that experience when I was washing my hands in the kitchen. I ended up in the bathroom. And he said that he ended up failing that exam. And he had to take it again because when he found himself outside the building, it was afternoon and the test was in the morning. Now, he only remembers that happening to him once, but I suspect that's not how things go. If that happens to you once, you're probably a frequent flyer, wherever it is that you're going. So my dad remembered that. I think that he might probably recall other things if I were to push it, maybe. But he didn't seem all that comfortable with having that memory. Now, my children haven't said anything about having any experiences, but where we used to live in our old house, we had to move because I couldn't go up and down the stairs anymore, and our house had 2 floors. So now we live in a condo, one-story condo. But in the old house where we were, the bedroom where the children were supposed to be sleeping, neither one of them wanted to sleep in there. They were terrified, and they're 7 years apart. So my firstborn didn't wanna sleep in there, and then when the second one was born, he didn't wanna sleep in there by himself. The other bedroom downstairs was okay, but this bedroom, for some reason, there was something in that closet that I picked up on, and they did not wanna be in there. Eventually, they actually moved up into the master bedroom. They did not wanna sleep alone in a room. So there was something going on that happened there. There was something in that closet. I didn't get the sense that it was anything malevolent, but I did see one night. This was actually really kind of scary. The only thing that really scared me to the point it's like, whoa, kind of pulling away from it. One night when I was sleeping, my little one was sleeping next to me. He had a cold, so he was sleeping in my bed, and he woke me up because he was having a bad dream. And when I opened my eyes above him, this horizontally was this thing that was floating with this skeleton head, and it looked like all tattered and wispy. It looked evil. Okay. And it turned its head to look at me like it seemed totally unnatural and basically said, "This does not concern you. Go back to sleep." Now, what troubles me the most about that experience is that I could not help myself. I rolled over and I actually passed out. And I left my child with this thing that clearly was upsetting him in his sleep. And I couldn't do anything about it. I mean, it literally just made me pass out. So that never happened again after that. But that was upsetting. None of the other experiences that I've had with the paranormal have been upsetting. This is the only one that was upsetting. So I'm glad we moved from the house, to be honest with you.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Like I've had shadow beings and stuff like that, paranormal stuff, but nothing bad-ish.
Yeah, no, this was not even bad-ish. It was downright bad.
Well,
Yeah.
um, getting back to the good stuff then.
Yeah, let's get back to the good stuff.
How about the being called Okrati? Am I pronouncing?
Okrate. Oh, man. She was the second being that I drew after Ava. Um, Now, I've only connected with this being while I was drawing her, and she is another hybrid. She is a gray and reptilian hybrid, and her story is absolutely fascinating. Um, what she told me was that the grays create hybrids not just with humans, but with every other species that they interact with, because these hybrids act as liaisons between their civilizations. It's apparently a lot easier for hybrids to sort of be the representatives of the gray, they're kind of the middle ground, so to speak. And so that's what she was. And she was on this ship that felt like a barge, humongous, huge, smelled absolutely horrific. This was the only time that I actually perceived smell. Um, and what her ship did, there was a ship with reptilians, sort of like the saurian kind, not the dinosaur kind that stand, with there's a difference in the hips of the saurians and the dinosaurs. These were reptilians who went around from planet to planet and collected decaying biomatter that was overwhelming that particular environment. Like after massive wars, when there was a lot of death or some illness, that would wipe out civilization, they would go and they would collect these bodies and they would synthesize the DNA and they would trade it with other civilizations who are interested in bioengineering. And one of those civilizations is the Greys. They can't ever have enough DNA. And having DNA extracted from actual beings as opposed to, trying to recreate it from a pattern, which they can do as well. That's how they ended up looking the way they do. A copy of a copy of a copy. That's the DNA that they prefer to have and this is what she told me, that they exchange DNA for technology. These two civilizations, at least on that particular barge. Now, they have an incredible immune system because they deal with this decaying biomatter that, in diseases, they don't get sick. And that's why the Greys are interested not just in the DNA that they collect from the surface of the planet, but their DNA as a species themselves. And that's why Ocrate was created. There was a result of that collaboration between, the two of them, exchanging technology and DNA and all of that. Now, to me, it seemed like a really morbid environment. But she was so happy and so vibrant and uplifting and just chattery. She just kept talking at me. And it was fascinating connecting with her. I really, really enjoyed her. And it surprised me that she was so bright and happy in what to me seemed like this really dark and morbid environment. She was really pretty cool. She was really cool.
You sent me a drawing of a being called Pete.
Oh, yes, Pete. He is an ant being, actually. Um, and he is from the civilization that the Hopi made reference to. And in my drawing, I tried to put in as many Hopi symbols as I could possibly find that would fit in the picture. So that's what those symbols are that I drew in white. And he is actually coming through a portal, which is what everything, all what the rest of the drawing around him is supposed to represent a portal. Excuse me. Now, from what I understand, um, Pete was hinting at the fact that his people are actually moving deeper underground right now because the surface is becoming increasingly more and more chaotic. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen, is going to pass. And then, they're basically coming back to where they usually are. But that was the message that I got for him, that they were sort of retreating because they didn't want to be involved in whatever, I don't know. And he was pretty amazing. Other than Chica, he was the only other insectoid that I connected with. And what's really interesting about them, excuse me, is when we connected telepathically, I was also able to get a sense of how he is connected with the rest of his hive, I guess, with the rest of his group, the hive mind, and how that feels. Um, and the noise that he is able to filter through so that he can focus on information that is relevant for him. Because they all talk all at once. At least that's how it seemed to me. They're constantly communicating massive amounts of information um, that most of us don't even pay attention to. Like it would be as if, as you and I are talking right now, I'm also including a description of what I'm looking out the window. That's part of the conversation. It's nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it becomes part of the information that I'm sharing with you. So, it seemed like what appears to be irrelevant information, but it's not. And somehow his brain can actually process all of that. His mind processes that somehow. I don't know how. But I got a glimpse into that, and it was pretty fascinating. It was really pretty fascinating. Now, Chica is not connected to a hive mind. He's a separate and unique individual, but Pete is not. He's both an individual and he is also part of the group in equal parts. So that was interesting. That was really pretty interesting.
Who's the being called Targ?
Targ, oh, he's also on the Council of Eight. He is actually, I think he's in charge of security. Yeah, he's in charge of security for the Council of Eight and also for our corner of the galaxy. And he was busy all the time. Trying to connect with him was difficult because he just was not available. And so the few glimpses that I got with him, which is why I drew him not in color, because that's how he seemed to me. It's like he was there, but he wasn't really there. He was busy someplace else. But I did get a sense of him. And unlike Zark, he doesn't have any emotions whatsoever. I mean, the perfect poker face. He's not mean in any way or dismissive um, or anything like that. He just does not have emotions. He's very analytical, logical to a T. I don't know how he functions without having any intuition. I can't imagine how that would be like because I rely on my intuition so much to, perceive what's going on. So that was a very interesting experience connecting with him. He was just flat and dry. So I drew him with a smile because even though he felt flat and dry, like a leaf, really, it made me think of like this withered up leaf that's just blowing in the wind with nothing to hang on to. It was just flat and dry. That's the best two words that I can come up with. But in any case, in spite of all of that, he still felt warm somehow. Not in an emotional way, obviously not in a physical way because we weren't physical next to each other, but he felt warm. So I tried to draw him with a warm smile. And I don't know to what extent I actually captured that, but that's how he felt. It's really difficult to describe because it does not translate well into human emotions, not having emotions. And so the rainbow all around him, I didn't realize I did that. Because he was black and white, I wanted to have some color. And there was no color that I really felt drawn to for his personality. So I put in all the colors, the rainbow, the spectrum of the rainbow. And later on, when I showed this drawing to Kevin, he told me the story about how these Greys came to visit him on the spaceship, and his wife at the time was outside in their yard and took a picture of this rainbow that had a UFO under it. You can see it in the picture. And so me drawing Zark with the rainbow, I don't know what connection there was between Zark and the rainbow in Kevin's story, but he felt there was a connection of some sort, Kevin did. And so this is what I'm saying. It's like there's things that show up in my drawings that I have no knowledge of or reason to put in anything specific. So, when Kevin brought that up, it's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. If you also notice when you look at the drawing of Zark, the hat he's wearing is also rainbow color. So for some reason, in my mind, grays and rainbows go together.
Imagine that. Now, you sent me an image concerning an opal moonstone.
Oh gosh, yes. Actually, that is more like a self-portrait, which is why I use that drawing for my profile picture on Facebook. Um, when I first learned about Bashar, and I was absolutely fascinated by his teachings. Um, I had this strong sense, again, that I knew him somehow, but that an aspect of myself actually exists in that civilization as a future self of some sort. The drawing, even though I did it as a self portrait, is actually of, I guess, this version of me. She feels like my daughter, and the way she relates to me is as if I'm her mom. So that's why I'm kind of interpreting that as, a great, 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 great granddaughter or another version of myself in that civilization. But she is Sasani. She is from Bashar's civilization. And so that's, I tried to capture that vibe by putting all of all the symbols that are around her in that drawings are actually from one of Bashar's transmissions about sacred circuits, and each one of them has a specific meaning and a specific vibration, and they represent different states of being that help you to sort of reach higher levels of consciousness. But she um, feels again like she is my daughter. And I asked her what her name was, and she told me that they don't have names, which is exactly what Bashar said, that they have frequencies. And she said that I should name her based on whatever it is that I remind her of, what her frequency reminds me of. And so opal was the first word that came to mind. And then moonstone was the second word that came to mind. So I named her Opal Moonstone. But what's interesting is sometimes when I connect to her, I call her Mona. I don't know why. I don't remember Opal. I remember Mona. So I guess she's got a first, middle, and last name. But yeah, she is Sasani. And I get the sense that she's taking care of something of mine over there. I don't know what it is. It feels like my body somehow, like I am in stasis and my consciousness is here, but my body is over there. I don't know. It's very strange, but that's what it feels like to me. It's like my body is over there in stasis, and I've sort of taken a leave of absence to be here for this experience somehow. Yeah,
Beacon,
brain trippy.
are you aware if you have hybrid children?
No, I'm not aware of that, but I do know that I interact with them at least as a teacher. I had some unexplained experiences while I was trying to get pregnant with my own children. We ended up actually having my second one. I had to do in vitro fertilization because I was older and things just weren't working right. But throughout the time, there were many years that my husband and I tried to get pregnant, and I would feel like I was pregnant, and then I wasn't. My period would be late, but it would still come. And so it was weird. It felt like I was pregnant, and then suddenly I wasn't anymore. And listening to some of the descriptions of the experiences that other women have had with having, their genetic material taken up that way. There's some similarities between that and the experiences that I was having, but I don't have excuse me, I haven't made any connection with a specific hybrid child. I have had many lucid dreams about being a teacher at a camp where I am surrounded by these children who look kind of human, mostly human, who are very special, and we're hiding. This is a recurring dream. Wherever this camp is up in the mountains, away from all civilization, and it's important that it stays hidden. But I read to them. I've had lucid dreams about going to look for children's books in this facility, this underground facility where I was being escorted around by this person, and it seemed very weird where we were. And yeah, he took me to this corner of this humongous warehouse where they had piled up all these children's books, and there were shelves filled with them. And I was supposed to select books to read to children. So definitely have some connection with the hybrid children, although that's about the extent of my experience with that. I haven't really explored it, to be honest. Probably because I don't want to know the answer if I have hybrid children or not. Um, that would be kind of, I don't know. I'd have to think about that, how I would feel. I'm not sure how I would feel about that. I'd want them here. Yeah.
Well, let's call it a day. We've been at this for over 2 hours, I think. So,
I know, it's been fun. I was looking at the clock, I'm going, "Man." But this was a lot of fun. I love talking about my drawing, so I really appreciate you just letting me just go on and on. Um, it's
yes,
just
I really wanted to get into most of your drawings. I know I do have a couple left, but yeah. But
well, we can do this again some other time. I'm good with it, yeah.
so, do you offer like drawing services, stuff like that?
Um, Not really. The way things evolved is once I started putting the drawings of the Council of Eight on Facebook, um, people started asking me if I would draw something for them. They wanted to have an idea, a visual of their own ET connections. And so I started doing that, and I've done several drawings for several people, but the more I posted them, the more people would ask me. And I really just got overwhelmed. I felt like I was in this space where there were this crowd of beings on this one side who were very happy and excited about making connections with their human counterparts or whatever you want to call them. And then there was this ever increasing line of people on the other side who, were waiting for me to draw portraits of their ET counterparts. And at one point, I just started feeling overwhelmed. And so I kind of backed away from that. And now I'm playing around with, 3D versions of ETs, playing around with sculpting. And I am not, I mean, I love drawing. Don't get me wrong. I really, really love drawing. I would rather draw than eat or sleep. But I think I just kind of needed to take a little break from that. I got overwhelmed. I don't know. It's difficult enough to learn how to set boundaries with people, especially for people who, like us, who are really empathetic and pick up on other people's emotions. And it's hard to tell the difference. It's who's who and what's what. But then I had to start learning how to set boundaries with these beings from other dimensions or other places because they were coming at me. And I didn't always have the time or inclination to connect with them. And so, yeah, I just got overwhelmed. But it was fun, and I'm looking forward to doing that again. I know I'm pretty sure I'm going to pick that up again. It's fun connecting with them. They're so loving and pleasant, and yeah.
Do you have a closing statement or perhaps a final story that you might want to get out?
Um, yes, actually, I have a message that has been emphasized to me repeatedly, especially lately. And it has to do with telepathy. Um, the message that I'm getting is that there are a lot of our star families that have been gathering around Earth during this time but we're going to have disclosure or open contact. I mean, that's inevitable. So they've been gathering around us and they're wanting to connect with us. The easiest way for them to connect with us now is, through telepathic communication, because they've tried to work with the government so we could meet, in person, but things are not working out quite the way that, that would work for everyone. I guess our governments are not quite ready yet, and I don't know that a lot of people are ready for face-to-face interaction, which is exactly the point that these ETs are making, is that there are many people out there who would be shocked. It would be scary, and they don't want to frighten us. So they really want to connect with us telepathically so that we get used to the idea that they're there. And telepathic communication, especially at the beginning, it's like, am I making this up? Is it my thoughts? Is it somebody else's thoughts? I don't really know. But regardless of whether or not we are aware of the actual communication, what's happening is we are becoming familiar with the presence of those beings. And so when we do meet face to face, it's going to be like, oh, I know you. Where do I know you from? Because we've been having this psychic connection all along. And again, being consciously aware of it definitely helps because you can build a relationship, that works. But these ETs are not going to engage in telepathic communication without permission. And they actually want us, those of us who are ready and are, excited about having that sort of a connection, to reach out to them and ask for this sort of contact. So nobody's going to try to break, through our psychic barriers or whatever you want to call it and force their way into our minds. That's not how it is. They're very respectful, actually, of us, I think much more than some of us are of them, which is pretty remarkable. And they're very compassionate. And the last thing they want to do is to frighten us. So whoever, resonates with this idea of telepathic communication with ETs on whatever level you are comfortable with, I recommend that, now is the time to seek that out, or at least give permission if you would like. And surprising things might happen. That's kind of what I'm being told. Plus, it's a lot of fun to have friends in other places.
I know.
I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Well, Aurora, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed myself. I really did.
You're a good ambassador for the council, so thank you.
Oh, good. You hear that, guys?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get a physical visit one of these days instead of just in my dreams.
Real hope. Well, thank you again. And to those watching, hope you enjoyed today's interview. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I will see you guys next time. So take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.